Does everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
See that? Yes.
Do I have the right number? Yep. Meeting number three. Hi, Dylan.
Hi everyone, how's it going?
Good. How are
Good.
you?
Good.
I think I'll just give it a little bit longer to see if we can get a few more people. Oh, it's not even 7 yet. I'm sorry. Hi, Leslie.
Hello,
How are you?
how are you doing?
Good. Hi, Andrew. Andrew, is that McDowell Boulevard with a semi truck behind you?
Well, exactly. It's the Keith Gusto Bakery outlet or distribution center, I guess. You know, it's so amazing. I wanted to put one up of Mesa Boogie because I love the story about them, right? I wish everybody knew just their history and how impactful they are to the music industry. Um, but if I used that image, I was blocking the sign and nobody would know what it is really. And so I used Keith Gusto instead because he has some really awesome baking products.
Have you taken a class with him?
No, not yet. I
It's
want
really
to.
fun. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
I
They're
I
really great
struggle
people.
with I struggle with breads. I have trouble getting the yeast to fully activate. So I
I
need to
can't
go take a class.
I can't do pie crusts. I can do everything else, can't do pie crusts.
I can't get them off the counter.
Yeah. No, I make them. They just turn out no one would eat them.
Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm excited because we haven't been able to have you at a meeting yet. So I hopefully, because we sent it a little bit later, hopefully this allows another planning commissioner to take part.
Yes, hopefully you won't hear too much toddler bedtime in the background. We'll see.
Well, why don't we give it like just a little bit longer to get started? But while we're waiting, I just for those of you that are with us, Ada, I hope this is okay. I'm going to introduce you. Um, so I think all of you know that this planning effort was funded by a grant from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC. And our project manager or project sponsor at MTC is joining us tonight, Ada Chan. And she's going to see some of the things that we talk about. And as we gear up to go to the Planning Commission on May 19th, and she's going to join us.
Excited to see where you guys are on this.
So are we. So is the Planning Commission. Okay. Well, let me see. How many do we have here? One, two, three, four.
10.
Okay, good. Well, we have. Oh, good. Dwayne's here. Frank's here. Okay. Okay. I had to spin. Oh, hi, Brent. How are you? And I had to just spin down a little longer. Um. Okay. So welcome to meeting number three. Um. I know for some of you, you haven't been able to get to all of them, but hopefully we'll give enough of a recap that we can move forward. What we really want to do tonight is get some feedback or confirmation from this group on some of the big picture ideas. that the consultant's been working with and showing to city staff, because we on May 19th we'll be going to the Planning Commission, and we'd like to at least give them some sort of a summary of how this group is thinking about some of these ideas. Oh, sorry. Here. So the agenda, which I sent out earlier, I think Friday or so, I'm just going to give a quick refresher on what we did, what we sort of looked at and talked about and did on meetings number 1 and 2. And then the first thing that we want to sort of get a confirmation from this group on is the idea that you've seen floating around, and that's that there's these two sub areas, one at the north and one at the south, that the consultant team really believes that's where the energy should be given for opportunity sites. One of them at the north is at the transit station, at the smart station, and within the TOC area. And then we want to talk about McDowell Boulevard. At our last meeting, we got a lot of ideas from you, from this group, about that corridor, safety and the multimodal aspects, how it has different character. And I think at the same time, the planning consultant was working sort of synergistically on some of the same ideas that this group was expressing. And then the last item, we want to talk about the strategy for placemaking, and it's really based in 3 pillars that have been discussed by the consultant team throughout this process. And so the 3 pillars of the planning process and how those can be used to implement implementation strategies for both future development, future corridor use, and things like that. So let me just go ahead. Oh, I see somebody. Oh, so is my audio bad? I'm seeing messages from people.
It kind of, I mean, it's kind of just going in and out. We can still hear you, but it goes like softer and louder.
Sorry. I'll speak up at least and see if I can speak into my microphone. So just a reminder on the meeting rules. I'll be directing the meeting. It's really great if we can all keep our cameras on just to support, engagement amongst ourselves and connecting with each other. When we're not looking at the screen, this isn't that important for this meeting because we're going to be looking at the screen a lot. But otherwise, I'll try to just go to a gallery view and we can see each other. I use the raise hand feature. I'll try to look for your hand. If I'm not seeing your hand, somebody yell at me. And then we changed the speaking limit to 1 minute, not to limit anybody, but I think there's a lot to talk about. And the way our conversations have been going the last few meetings, you guys have been pretty polite. Nobody seems to be stepping over each other. And there's a lot of give and take. So hopefully if we can keep our comments to a minute, it'll create more of a conversation and less of a comment period. And you guys have been really good about the last bullet point, not talking over each other. So just to remind you, what we're trying to do, we call it the community outreach partners model, and that's the partnership between you folks, you guys on the working group, and your constituencies that you're bringing to the table. I know that a lot of you had some of your networks coming to the workshop on March 21st. That was really helpful. So we saw a lot of people there, and we want to continue that. And so on May 19th, there will be a planning commission meeting to study. It's a study session to really delve into this. And so to the degree that you can alert your neighbors or constituents about that, that would be great. And so what the group, the community outreach partners model does is it hopefully builds community trust that what you're doing, going out into your community, tell them what you see here. It amplifies our ability on a limited budget to have a greater outreach effort. And through that, it can enhance additional opportunities for community participation. So it's informal, it's staff facilitated. So I'm the project manager for the city of Petaluma. Andrew Tripple's part of the call. He's the planning manager, and then Rainey Doe, an assistant planner within the community development department, is with us. We're not subject to the Brown Act, so we don't have to do some of the rigorous steps that would take. And we're trying to, this meeting's being recorded. We're trying to be as transparent as possible, get the recording of this meeting up on the website so people who are not here can come and see what we talk about. We're not a decision-making body. We're making recommendations to the planning commission and eventually the city council so that they can move forward with the best way to tell the consultant the approach to putting the specific plan together. So just a reminder, I know most of you probably know your general plan is the update is coming to fruition right now. The Planning Commission just recently had a study session on it. It's going to the council soon. And so there's a lot of things that are out in the community that really can feed into our planning process. The general plan has a vision statement, it has guiding principles, it has its own pillars, the general plan pillars, and then it also has city council goals that are being reflected in it. And when you put that together with the three bubbles at the bottom, which were in the initial proposal from our consultant, these three big picture ideas, and we'll come back to them towards the end when we talk about implementation and really an emboldened urban design and community design strategy. Climate resilience, really being responsive to climate change, especially in so much of our study area being flood prone and in the flood zone. Um, a healthy community, so sustainability and resiliency in how the community is able to prosper, and then equitable development, both residential and all types, commercial, all different kinds of activities, that it's equitable and is reflected in the policies that the specific plan will have. This is a statement really early on by the consultant, and how they see the purpose of the specific plan. This is really relevant now, again, because of your general plan update. The general plan is the big picture document that guides the entire city. And by doing this specific plan, specifically focused on what started out as the MTC PDA area, and the specific plan started with that, but we want to talk about what the plan boundaries should be. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. But this is a chance to get really specific circulation, land use policies, really tailored to our neighborhood there on the east side between Washington and Corona, and even further north of Corona. So with that, I know some of you weren't able to get to meeting number 1 or meeting number 2. I shared last weekend some of the overviews of those meetings, but let me also just give a real quick overview right now. So meeting number 1, you'll remember the city, the consultant was dealing with a concept that comes out of the general plan, the 15-minute neighborhood, and how rich and complex those neighborhoods can be. And the more rich and complex that a neighborhood can be, the more valuable it might be to the people who live and work in that neighborhood. So from the very beginning, the consultant's been working with this idea of how do you incorporate that at our scale, our specific plan scale. You'll remember, hopefully, that they also looked at the study area. It's a large study area, over 1,100 acres. And there's a whole series of ways of looking at it. You could look at it just the PDA, the boundary, which we started with from MTC. And then you can start to look at it as a corridor plan, the McDowell corridor being the spine that goes through the entire, that's about, it's close to 3 miles from the top to the bottom. You can talk about just at the bottom lower left, you can talk about just the area around the smart station as just an immediate smart station area. You can talk about the 15-minute neighborhood around the smart station. So start to grab more land and understand how those uses can be conducive. And then at the same time, with the transit center just south of Washington, there's another transit focused neighborhood that can start to emerge at the south. And so, how do you connect all of that together in one specific plan? And really, where they started working on this is an early sketch. They weren't in computers yet, they were just drawing by hand. And they were really playing with that idea that there's these two transit nodes at either end of this 2.5, 3 mile long corridor. And then there's the corridor in between. So it's kind of a transit plan, kind of a corridor plan. And there's a lot of things that go on, a lot of different types of things. So if you'll remember at meeting number 2, we asked you folks to weigh in a little bit on what happens. What about McDowell? What about those areas between the focus areas? So with that, I'll move to meeting number 2. So again, we have the orange is the specific plan area, the station at the north, the 15-minute POC policy area where residential and commercial densities need to be really paid attention to and really focused on creating amenity and creating ridership at the transit center. And then you have the long McDowell corridor crossing Washington. And then you can see just outside our study area, it's not very far and you're already to the next smart station. So we do have a large study area that extends from the north all the way to Washington and really close to downtown. So you remember at meeting number 2, we talked about how there had just been the workshop. The consultant had the workshop. They did a table exercise that many of you took part in if you were there. And they really asked you to focus on some ideas for what could happen at the transit village, subarea 1, and then what they saw as subarea 2, sort of an emerging health district, which could take in Petaluma Hospital, the wonderful node of Lucchesi Park as an opportunity for recreation and such, community events, and then a potential opportunity site both across from the hospital, a residential development that's probably coming online soon, but then the larger opportunity site of that shopping center and what could happen there. And I know for those of you that were at the workshop, we did spend some time really talking about what could happen to make better use of the large parking areas at that shopping center. So if you'll remember, for those of you that were at the workshop, the consultant took us through a whole lot of ways of looking at each of these study areas. If you'll remember, we looked at study area 1 first, sub area 1 first, and really tried to imagine what were some of the things that could happen up there. And then sub area 2, that map's mislabeled, but they had that 2 there. And so what were the types of things that could happen in those opportunity areas? And you'll remember, they're not saying that Lucchesi Park would be changing, would be developing, but it could become definitely a community focus area as an open space and community orientation, a community oriented place of place of being. So if you recall at the last meeting, because the workshop had focused so much on table 1 and table 2, the 2 tables that we had for the sub areas, I wanted you guys to give me some ideas or give us some ideas about what happens in that area in between. And so there's a lot of discussion, trees, better mobility, better safety, not just cars, not just trucks. There's a lot of cars, there's a lot of trucks, but they need a safer pedestrian and bicycle environment. And so we took in a lot of ideas for that. And as I said earlier, the consultant was working at the same time, almost as if they were listening to us, because they came in with some ideas that I'll share in just a little bit about a way to approach McDowell. So with that, let's go to talk in greater detail about that was the summary of meeting number 1 and meeting number 2. So I'd like to just talk about we want to get some confirmation from this group about these 2 sub areas, the one at the north and the one at the south. We'd like to be able to go to the planning commission and basically say what we're hearing from you, from this group, and how that feeds into the decision that the consultant will be asking them, or the discussion that the consultant will be asking the planning commission to have about a preferred alternative. And this is going to be one aspect of it, these 2 sub areas. So if you'll recall, the consultant started by looking at this long area and started to breaking it into identifiable or manageable neighborhoods, if you will. So they call them circuits. And then you get up to the north and you can see the Corona Road area up at the north with the purplish hatch. So we've been working with the consultant on this idea, and I sent this this out to you folks. I think over the weekend. We want to make sure that we don't just limit ourselves to the PDA area as the MTC PDA as a boundary, but really take into account what the voters did in November of 2024 when they reauthorized the UGB. So the UGB still stays along Corona Road, but there is a stipulation that if the right kind of transit-oriented plan comes before the council, is given to the council to consider, the council by a 6 out of 7 vote could expand the UGB and therefore make those parcels eligible for annexation. So even the reason I'm bringing this up is just even because the consultant isn't yet showing that in their drawings, they are aware of this idea that we're going to be working with these property owners and the planning commission and the council to understand that based on what the UGB decision was, that we make this planning opportunity take full advantage of what's in front of us. So rather than having a sawtooth approach to Eli Road, you would just actually have all of these parcels go out and touch Eli Road. It doesn't mean that they all have the same density. I think we're almost all in agreement that most of the density would be directed towards the train station, but you can start to have an urban design approach to what the Eli Road frontage would be. So if you'll recall, we've seen various versions of this. This is a very conceptual land use approach to sub-area 1. And the darker yellow indicates a higher density of residential development. So again, that's focused towards the station. The green is multi-use. So it's not just a green pathway, but it's also a resiliency feature. It's a flood control feature. It's also like holding it's a fire defense mechanism too, so that the streets, the open space, and the architecture, particularly as you get to the outskirts of the urbanized community, would be more defensible. Just one more slide, and then or 1 or 2 more slides, then we can break into conversation and hear some opinions and reactions. The sub-area 2, if you'll see up there, they say land use alternative full. They did 2 versions of this. This is looking at the full, means that they've looked at the entire shopping center site and tried to imagine it may not look like the green space may not look like that in terms of that much of the space, but it would be a feature again that sort of creates resiliency, deals with flooding. When you see blue streets on these maps, that they intend those to be streets that are flood control streets too, so that streets are designed to not just shed off water, but to absorb it and fit into that resiliency pattern that they see being a strong component of this plan. And then the one feature, the site across from the hospital even though it's showing it might have ground floor commercial, that won't be the case. It's the people that are moving forward with that site will probably have a 100% residential site. So this is some of the ideas, just making better use of that vast parking area. Maybe there's an opportunity to introduce some housing in that, better circulation, better coordinated use of parking. At least the table that I sat in the March 21st workshop was aware of, you can't just go in and just develop housing on every parking lot. You also still have to manage the parking that's necessary, and it has to be fiscally sound. So I think some of the conversations I was hearing March 21st were really great to hear, people expressing a vision, but understanding that it has to be economically feasible. So I just want to kick off you guys. I've been talking for a while. I want to hear from you folks. Does the working group agree with this approach that the consultant is working with to have these two sub areas where that's probably the most ideal opportunity for future development, because so much of the particularly residential along McDowell is set. That's not going to change. But so if that's the right approach, we'd like to hear about that. And then we've added a couple extra comment or extra questions. Are there strengths in that approach? Is there something that is viable, or if viability becomes evident in that, or are there limitations, or maybe both? So I just want to kick it off there. I think I'll go to a view. I'll stop sharing my screen is what I'm saying. And just go to a gallery view and just raise your hand. And if you need to see a slide, I can bring an image back. Any takers?
It seems like it'd be easier to talk about things if we actually had a visual up on the screen.
Yeah, are we supposed to be talking about everything right now, or are we going to concentrate on one area and then talk about another area?
We're going to try to capture your ideas about both sub areas. So if it's easier for you to express that one at a time, please do. I'm trying to share my screen.
But I think Nicola, while he's doing that, this is a really fundamental move in the planning process, right? To identify these two primary redevelopment opportunity areas and to focus on them as areas for redevelopment. And so we do have the question, is this approach of identifying these two areas that sort of are the ends of the study area, and focusing on those for land redevelopment, and then the connection of the corridor to build them and bring them together. Is that a good approach? So kind of broadly about the approach, but then, yeah, some thoughts specifically on the sub areas.
Frank, do you have your hand up?
Yes. At some point I think I'm on my iPhone, so I'm kind of restricted in what I could see. But if is there a slide that relates to Eli Road and what's planned for that? And I'm also interested in what's planned for Corona Road in terms of making it wide enough so that it could be pedestrian friendly, or right now you can't really walk that area because there's ditches and on either side. I'm concerned also about with additional development, there's going to be additional water flowing into the Petaluma River, which I think the stakeholders of that resource want to avoid. And I'd like to know if any consideration is being given to that in this process.
Well, yes, the answer would be yes. The specific plan will look at infrastructure. So basically, like Andrew said, we're looking at, is this the right area to focus as an opportunity area? And with that comes not just land use and development, but also circulation, flood control, all of those things would have to be studied as part of the specific plan and certainly as part of the environmental impact report. Dylan, you have your hand up.
Yep. I just want to comment. I think I do like those focusing on these two areas. I think that's smart to focus on these two areas because I think those are the two areas that obviously, need the most work, thought about and most development probably done. Especially obviously around the smart station and making sure those parcels I agree with those parcels becoming, the UBG expanding with those areas. And then, I like some of these roundabouts I'm seeing. It looks like maybe some new roundabouts that we put in place to kind of slow traffic down and the connection between the two. But I do really like the focus on those two areas because I think those are pretty strong areas that need some work done, right? And I do like looking at that, the Kmart shopping center and seeing what else we can do with that, right? I think there is a lot of land there that we could expand upon that and make that. Obviously, those traffic circles there, I'm assuming those are traffic circles, look like they're going to slow that traffic down, and then using that empty land for new residential, and then maybe even building some residential within that, just like Deer Creek has done, right? Where we have, apartments or, those could be some lower income housing as well to add that, or even some senior housing. I think we're really lacking senior housing in the community. We have those mobile home parks. Obviously, we know what's going on with those, but I think we're lacking also some senior affordable like apartment complexes that closer to stores that would really help, I think the seniors. So I think adding that in there, or maybe just changing the buildings to, build taller buildings that have residential and commercial on the bottom floor. I think that's really good. But my opinion is I do like focusing on those two areas.
And let me just also augment something really quickly based on what you said. We should look at those white circles as a graphic device that indicates sort of a node. They're not meant to indicate traffic circles per se. They're not, it's not
Okay.
supposed to be, just so you know. I just want to make sure you don't go away thinking we're having a bunch of traffic circles here.
Okay, because I kind of made that assumption because there's one over there where the current traffic circle is near Corona.
That's
So maybe
true.
that maybe you should change that icon if it's not going to be that.
Right. Any other hands that I might not be seeing? Enough. But Dwayne, I'm not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious to what you're thinking. I know you've been helping me to identify some of the property owners up in the north and making sure that we make the best use of the urban growth boundary decision that the voters did. Do you have any comments or thoughts?
No, that would be one subject. Can you put that other map up, the north map? Yes. Um, First of all, just it occurs to me that most people walk 3 miles an hour if they're out walking, and that means that a half a 15-minute neighborhood is closer to 3/4 of a mile, and it's good to have some appreciation of that, which would include, therefore, all of the lots up through 30 to be included if we were actually talking about 15-minute neighborhoods. The other thing I would mention is that lot number 25 there on the map is not included in the urban growth expansion area. It couldn't be without a vote of the public. And that's the most likely direction there would be a fire problem. And so we would want to see to it that the line along that southeast side of 25 be the area where we would emphasize to keep fires from coming in. Not likely to see fires coming across the rail, but that would be the second area that would want to protect the area from. And that's That would be my first thought. And my second thought would be that currently a small pond forms to hold water during the winter, and it would be appropriate to continue with a small pond. And I'm talking about not Lucchesi style. I'm talking just enough to hold the water. We don't want to contribute to the water problem downstream. We have very little in the area that's shown with the multiple colors there. That the
Could someone please mute their phone? There's a lot of background noise coming in.
and yeah, so I was trying to say that the fire I want to address, the water wanted to address, and the walking. It would be nice to be able to have a bike lane service these either through the property or including through the approximately 120 acres, but along Eli and along Corona have a bike lane to get to the rail. I'm a great fan of the rail and will ride rail to both north and south pretty regularly. So that would be my addition, is the safety of biking and walking, and the two hazards. I would like to see the shopping center. I would like to see people be able to live in 120 acres at 20 average of 20 density per house per unit would be per acre would be 2,000 homes. We would need a small market similar to some of the ones that are locally owned in Petaluma.
Let me
food.
Let me move on. Let me just make sure we can hear from everyone. Brent, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah, I think the north sub area is totally appropriately identified and a focus of the plan. The area that's I think it's called the healthcare district, perhaps. That's essentially a rezoning and redevelopment of the shopping center. And what I want to point out is that sub area could and should be expanded to include the McDowell corridor itself. Not so much that we're actually rezoning the land in the corridor, because as you've pointed out, it's already fully residential and built out on one side, and on the other side it's more industrial and commercial. But that neighborhood that's between the SMART station and the shopping center at Washington and McDowell, that's identified in the draft general plan as one of our disadvantaged communities. And it's, the draft general plan calls for, equitable development within the city. And I know we've sort of verbally expressed a desire to have that area, have more trees and more sidewalks and more having it be more walkable. That I think that should be an identified emphasis with even greater attention to what issues the draft general plan identifies for that particular neighborhood as making it a disadvantaged community. If I recall correctly, the number one issue was heavy truck traffic and diesel traffic on McDowell, and that needs to change. I've walked down that street the last couple of weeks, at least 3 times. Taking the SMART trail from downtown up to that area, and that is definitely in need of a focus for this specific planning area. I don't think we should make this plan just focus on the development around the SMART station and around the shopping center, because I think that ignores the rest of the community as a point of emphasis. I think there should be a point of emphasis for that disadvantaged community in between.
Okay, great. So Brent, I think we're going to want to hear from you on our next agenda item, where we'll talk about some of the ideas that the consultant is starting to work with for the corridor itself, the area between these two sub areas. But those are great comments. Thank you. Does anybody else, is there a hand I'm not seeing by any chance? Oh, Nicola? You're on mute.
Can't get my hand gesture to work because I don't know where it is. No, I was just same thing with that we just heard is that we can't ignore that whole section that doesn't have services, doesn't have good communication, doesn't have good transit coverage. That section that is not necessarily the train station and is not necessarily the health area. That area in between is a whole area that is lacking in services. I think Brent is right that that's a critical area. If you are in that area at all, you know that you don't have the usual services and you don't have transportation abilities. Walking, bicycling doesn't really happen in that area.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm really excited to get to the next item because I think what Nicola and Brent are both speaking to, we're going to see how close the consultant is starting to get towards implementing those kind of strategy and ideas. But before we do move on, does anybody else want to say anything about the approach to the sub areas?
David has his hand up.
Who has a hand up?
David.
David, please. Oh, David and Frank. Yes, David, you go first and then Frank.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'll take the opportunity to just give a 5-second intro here because I missed the first couple meetings. I had schedule conflicts, so I appreciate y'all doing it tonight. My constituency is PBAC, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. Our meeting is the first Wednesday of every month, so tomorrow night if anybody wants to come. But I just want to, you mentioned something at the beginning. I'm glad to hear it came up in the previous meeting about bikes and pedestrians as being a priority. I was just reflecting back on the slide you had at the beginning with climate resilience, healthy community, equitable development. I would just say that I think biking is probably the lowest hanging fruit to address some core principles that y'all are trying to achieve. And I would just echo what the previous two speakers just mentioned that I think, and it sounds like you're getting to this, so maybe this is just another segue point here that I think addressing the bikeability and walkability of the entire stretch of McDowell that's in the study area is like #1 priority in my mind. So I'll probably, this is the first time I'm bringing it up, I'll probably bring it up a lot. But I think it needs to be a protected, separated bike lane and walkway, multi-use path kind of thing to really give people a safe option. You're talking about heavy diesel trucks and the temporary green bollards that are in the north section of McDowell, I think are okay, but I think in general are not the preferred approach. So I hope that's part of what's being studied here. To answer your question, I guess I don't feel like I have enough information to be able to really give you a strong opinion. It seems like from what you said, there isn't really a lot of option, maybe, as far as like, are there other areas that could be studied besides these two? It sounds like no, because the rest of it's kind of fixed, built residential. So, I mean, I think these seem like good areas to study, but I'm not clear that there's actually an alternative. Did I miss that?
Okay, thanks. Frank and then Dylan.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Well, the first thing is I'm not sure my camera is turned on. I don't see my image on the screen. I don't know if anybody else is seeing me.
No,
it's not on purpose if nobody can see me. But I also wanted to expand on what Wayne had talked about in terms of he mentioned a naturally occurring pool on somewhere in the North Study area, and that's something that ought to be considered as possible a way to capture runoff that otherwise would go into the river. Maybe a way to divert water from the ditches along Corona Road, and perhaps to recharge the aquifer. The Petaluma Valley aquifer is something that the level of that has been a subject of concern. And I don't know whether the soil is ideal for that or whether it has that potential or not. So I think those would be useful to think about.
Sure. And then just before we go on to Dylan, just because a couple of you have brought this up. The graphics that the consultant is using, they use a blue for streets, where they envision the street not just being a street that moves people and cars and bikes and such, but also having a role in the the stormwater resiliency, as do the green spaces. So those, like for instance, if you see the green stripe that goes from the far up down through the unincorporated part of the community, that's not just supposed to be a green park or a walkway. It's also serving a flood control feature. And I think that might be near where that pooling is that both you and Dwayne have spoken about. So the consultant is working with these ideas that they're not just streets, they're not just parks, but they have multifaceted characteristics and roles to play in future development. Dylan.
Yeah, just a couple things. So I'm glad to see over here that the places across from the smart station are also being considered. I think those also could be viable places for higher density residential. I know they're mixed use right now, but higher density residential and commercial. Because I think right now one's an auto, a car, auto shop and other things. So I think that land could be used much more dramatically and for better use than it is now. I did want to add, and I know I talked about this in the first meeting. I want to make sure that we're including broadband connectivity when we're talking about all these new places, right? We need to lay fiber, make sure fiber is laid there, make sure we have those, and make sure that we have something in this, especially this side of town where the smart station is. I brought this up before. The cell phone, the mobile coverage over here is abysmal from all carriers, and I've been working with a couple city council members to talk about that, to try to get something to try to fix that. But I definitely think that should be included in this, because if we're going to add all these residential and commercial places over here, I think we need to make sure we're laying fiber where we can. I sat on the tech committee for a long time, and when that was still a thing, and we had a policy that we really pushed the city to put in place, which was a dig once policy. So if we're going to dig places up and put new places in, then we should be laying fiber and things like that we need for those places. So I wanted to mention that, and I wanted to add to David's comments. We talked a lot about that corridor, and it sounds like we're going to talk about that more now, but we did talk about making that more bike friendly and put tree canopies up and make it more friendly from trucks in our other two meetings. So we have been talking about that.
Okay, great, thanks. Those are all great ideas. I'm going to move on. So what we want to hear from people from the group here is the confirmation that the strategy that I'm about to lay out, which I think touches on some of the ideas that we heard from a number of you, Dave, Brent, Dylan, Nicola, for a strategy for McDowell Boulevard to implement improvements. So the improvements might not necessarily be development, but there can certainly be a lot of improvements the specific plan identifies for mobility and circulation and improvement in that way. So the consultant started looking at sort of the multi-dimensional aspects of McDowell, and what kind of corridor it is. And so it's a number of different things. So they see it as a multimodal corridor. So, and by that we mean not just bikes, not just the train, not just buses, but also getting off the street. So using the creekways and some of the natural drainage routes to connect back into the neighborhood. So where there might not be a street, like at Sunrise Parkway, there might be other places where there's a creek or some sort of path that allows you to expand the opportunities for mobility. And they also see it as an ecological corridor. So where all of those different open space pieces are, whether it's something like a linear line of street trees, whether it's a median in the street, or whether it's something like what Dwayne and Frank spoke about, ponding places that might happen that can work into a circulation system, you can start to see that there's an ecological component that could be thought about. You see in the legend, they're working with these ideas of hubs and patches. Those are trying to take advantage of existing either greenway creeks or open space components, and how do you stitch those together and again bring people to and along the corridor. So the third component, I'm hoping that this is going to be to resonate with some of you, especially with some of the comments we're hearing about, hey, don't just focus at the north and the south. We need to think about what's happening to the area in between along McDowell. So they've started grappling with, breaking this into sub areas. And eventually, if this comes to fruition and the planning commission and the council gives them the go ahead to, yeah, really expand on that, this can start to see itself expressed in things like the street cross section. So, how you address an area where there's a lot of residential development that backs onto McDowell, and then just a little bit further on, you have either an opportunity area or you have residential or commercial frontages. So that leads to a different way to treat that frontage. So they started looking at how do we break this into segments. So with that, let me just kind of show a little bit about what they're talking about. Let's start down at the south. As we talked about in the previous agenda item, there's a potential opportunity site at the plaza, the retail center. And then there's a park that's a great community center. And then there's a series of other residential and non-residential uses on both sides of McDowell. And so that would be sort of the southern piece of McDowell. And depending on how they look at it, that could come to fruition in how they design the frontage, how they design multimodal pathways, bike lanes, how do they use that fairly wide McDowell corridor and try to implement greater use of it by bicycles, pedestrians, and strategies for landscaping. So here's just some reference imagery they use. So everything from the man at the upper left walking along the street frontage, and it's not your typical sidewalk, but it's actually a trail. It could be a multi-use path, and then development that fosters, activity and ability for people to have a place to use it, whether it's with a building like the second to the top left, or even public art and the way to activate plazas or spaces, either at a large scale, like this guy sitting on the large planter sculpture, or even a smaller scale. So where in front of development, there might be the component I like the picture at the top right, because it's showing not only is there activation at the sidewalk, but you can see that the planting behind the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and the street, is done in a way where it's actually recharging the aquifer, if you will. It's allowing that any rainwater or runoff to soak down into the soil. And then, of course, at the bottom right, one way to activate the sidewalks is with infrastructure that supports bikes and other multimodal methods of transit. The next segment is from Rainier, basically up to Corona. And as I said earlier, a lot of that is residential communities that aren't really going to change. That's going to stay the same. A lot of those have frontages along McDowell that aren't necessarily conducive to multimodal circulation. And so some of the development standards that the consultant team could start to think about in this segment, they might design those improvements to look different than the other segments, so that McDowell still exists as one long corridor, but maybe there's an opportunity for design differentiation to express what's happening on either side of it, whether it's a residential community or an opportunity site. So what you would see is you see those 3 bullet points: improvement, 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 and then it's the word edge. So how do you treat that edge, both as an opportunity site? Are there city-owned places that can be activated, perhaps even sooner as a city project? And then what about unimproved edges and things? The last, oh, and then here's some imagery again. You'll see in these pictures, it's just a lot about activation. And so you see there may be places where you could have at the lower right a pop-up site. So for instance, where one of those creekways comes out and hits a multimodal, multi-use path along McDowell, there might be a platform that food trucks or retail trucks or something like that pop-up experience could use, or it could be a little bit more stable, more permanent, as you see the pictures above. But the idea for all of this, and some of these pictures are duplicates, but at the lower left, you again see landscaping in front of buildings that's activating the frontage with use, but it's also the type of landscaping that uses native species and native plants and hopefully recharges the aquifer. So it's grabbing rainwater and runoff and trying to absorb it into a system rather than just sending it onto the street and into a storm drain. So the last segment is then north of Corona, where you get into the area where there's a lot of industrial activity. Sort of, it's been called like the Maker's Alley, that they're thinking about how to really activate that, use this existing buildings and businesses that are prospering and build on that to create more of a identifiable neighborhood that again uses McDowell as its primary armature. And then that can lead into, well, what are the design improvements that could really express what the frontage of McDowell could be in this section to the north, so that you're still promoting non-vehicular traffic, but you're still allowing for the types of traffic, certainly in this area, that need to service those very active and prosperous businesses. So again, you see activating the frontages with landscaping and pedestrian scale design improvements that can be at the front of development or future development. So then I'm going to come to the place where I stop talking and we'll start to get some ideas of what you folks feel. And so again, I think what we want to know is this breaking McDowell into segments that can be the key to expressing them differently, so that there's a different design intention that you might see at each of these segments that's reflective of the type of land use that's happening on either side of McDowell. But at the same time, McDowell still is able to function and operate as a corridor. So with that, let me see if anyone has anything to say, and I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, I don't see where I can raise my hand, but this is Greg Gardia. There's an area that we haven't really talked about, and if you're coming down Lynch Creek, and right before you're going towards downtown, right before you get to 101, behind the shopping centers there, you have the different medical facilities right there. Then you have Freeman Brothers, and that whole corridor right along 101. There is some existing pathway, some decomposed granite, and that can actually be extended all the way down to Maker's Alley if that's an option. I ride and walk that area often, and also along the river too. Before if you're going on Lynch Creek, you go under the freeway and you're going towards downtown, and before you walk over that first bridge to the left and get you on the left hand side of the river, if you go to the right, there's an empty field that goes along the river, and I take that all the way over to the Smart Bridge and then pop up and then walk downtown that way. So those are avenues for bicycles and pathways and things that we haven't talked about.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, I think that trail you talked about, 101 behind Deer Creek up to the Makers Village area, was brought up previously as well. So
Okay.
it's definitely well known in the community, and we need to be sure we capture that. I just wanted to comment when when the team presented this idea of segmenting McDowell Boulevard and thinking about how it serves how it's designed can respond to adjacent land uses. I really thought it was one of the smartest moves I've ever seen in a planning process. Um, because we ceased to think about the boulevard as having to be the same and continuous all the way through. And we're starting now to think about it being more responsive to and respectful of the adjacent land uses, while at the same time considering how it needs to move vehicles not just for jobs and economic development purposes, but it also needs to move people who want uh, to transit up and down the corridor, whether that's by public transit or bike or walking. And so I really hope we can get some good feedback and input on this idea of segmenting the boulevard, because I think it can be a really, really important move. And I think it really highlights the power of this planning process and some of the things that we're doing here. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Andrew. So, oh, yes, Nicola.
Can we go back to the second section, the middle section? Yes. You'll notice that behind Petaluma Estates and behind most of this, the creek comes down and then turns and goes right behind Petaluma Estates and it can actually continues all the way down. It is a functional creek for a variety of reasons. It's the background of the Caltrans wall, but it's also very, very wide. And it's wide enough for trucks to go down it when they're doing the repair work or doing gardening work down there. I know that it's not available as a walk pathway in the rainy season, but it could be a fair weather pathway. It's really beautiful, and it's also a nature path. We have deer, we have fox, we have ducks, birds, quail, all sorts of things using that whole area behind there. It's quite wide. It's probably maybe 40, 50 feet wide at least, maybe even wider, with a creek in the center and two terraced sides of them, with oak trees and all native kind of plants and stuff. So it's really beautiful there. It happens to be my backyard. I can see and have that as part of my backyard. And it's really great back there. It's not a usable area right now because it doesn't really belong to the city of Petaluma. It belongs to the county water district, partially Caltrans, partially who knows what else. But it'd be something to think about. There could be a whole park in that area, a waterway park in the middle of winter for flood control, because it is used for flood control. That's why it was built. And then beyond that, the rest of the time it could be used other ways, by hiking and nature and that sort of stuff. I don't know, Andrew, have you been in that area at all?
No, I haven't, but I want to go. So if you see me walking through your backyard, you'll know why.
You're more than welcome to come see my backyard. I've actually cut out part of my back fence and I have a grill over it, a real fancy Victorian grill over it, so I can watch what's happening out there because it is
Wow.
really gorgeous to watch all the time.
Sounds like it.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
come
want to get
visit
us
me
off.
anytime.
Sure. I don't want to get us off tracking by trying to go find the right map, but there is a map. I don't know if it's in this presentation. The consultant is definitely thinking about these water corridors, not just as opportunities for sort of site specific, but also how do you bring them into a network? How do you use those to expand, um, circulation opportunities? So you'll definitely see that. Jessica, and then two other people have their hands raised. Jessica, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'll also just take a quick second to say hello and introduce myself. I'm Jessica Moses. I'm on the Planning Commission and wasn't able to make the first couple of meetings. So thanks for making this one a little bit later. But yeah, I think I am generally open to the idea of sort of chunking up McDowell. My one concern when I hear that proposal, especially as it pertains to the PBAC priorities, which I share, is that you end up with this like inconsistency across the road, which, as we saw throughout a lot of the time spent for the active transportation plan, is like already a real struggle across the city. So I don't want to bake in more of that disconnected streetscape and bike and ped facilities into this when we're sort of, green pasture. So I just wanted to put that out there as like, yes, open to sort of being responsive to the specific neighborhoods, characters, and to the extent that we are being considerate of what activation makes sense for those. But McDowell proper in many cases will be taken end to end. So I don't want to have it be too chunked up. Oh, Tom, you're muted if you're trying to reply.
I'll move on to other speakers, but let me just quickly respond to that, Jessica.
Sure.
We didn't try to bring them here, but the consultant is actually already starting to work with cross sections, and we thought for a 90-minute meeting it would just bog it down because they haven't settled on anything. But they're starting to look at cross sections for how to get everything or potentially everything from a road diet to just something a little bit safer than what it is right now. And
Sure.
the big goal they have is to not create a discontinuous corridor that you can.
Great.
They believe, and we think they're right, that you can be responsive to these different sections and what's going on either side of the frontage, but still have a cohesive corridor. But we'll see.
Glad to hear
We'll
it.
see what more things they can come on.
Great.
Dave, and then Brent.
Yeah, I just would echo what Jessica just said. Same concern about looking at segments. I guess, one thought that comes to mind for me is as great as it is that this goes all the way down to Washington, it also stops, short of Petaluma Boulevard North, Old Redwood Highway, where McDowell ends up. So I guess there's nothing much we can do about that here. But I guess it sounds like the last two meetings y'all have been very friendly and cordial. So maybe I'll try to say something a little bit more provocative and say that I think if you do not have a protected bike lane all the way down McDowell, that is, very safe and comfortable for all ages and abilities of bike riders, then I would say that would be a failure at this day and age if the goals of this organization are to climate resilience. Again, like this is the lowest hanging fruit, and I think e-bikes have opened up the ability for more people to be able to get out of their cars. They're just looking for safe ways to do it to get around town. We already have the smart paths. That's great. Connect this whole area to downtown. Washington corridor is going to be tricky. That's maybe not part of this, but I really think that's should be like a guiding principle for the McDowell corridor is to not just make a slight improvement. And when you showed the map that said protected slash, or I forget what it said, it has to be a protected separated bike line, or else I think something was missed.
Okay, thank you.
Brent.
Great. Thanks, Tom, and appreciate David's comments because I'm very supportive of the creative efforts, to create a cohesive yet sort of segmented McDowell corridor. I do appreciate, Tom, I heard you say road diet, and that's what I wanted to emphasize as we work to make the corridor, with a protected bike lane, traffic calming. We don't need a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit zone on that stretch. and that usually translates to 50 miles per hour by the people who are driving it. And that creates a really unfriendly corridor when there's 4 lanes of traffic and cars are driving between 40 and 50 miles an hour. So I think the road diet is the most important part of addressing the disadvantaged community issue and creating a more aesthetically and community friendly corridor. There's no reason that the trucks need to drive 40 miles an hour. They could drive 30, and cars as well. So I hope that we do things that help calm the traffic and actually make it a community street rather than a boulevard.
Okay, thanks.
That's a good quote. Community street rather than a boulevard. Dylan.
Yeah, I just want to add, to David's comment, I think we did talk about that in the first thing. I completely agree that McDowell should have a protected bike lane. We probably have to do the road diet and kind of slow down traffic there. I just wanted to add, we should do the same thing on Sonoma Parkway as well. I live kind of in between both of those. My son rides his bike to school, on Sonoma Parkway. So doing that on both of those roads, I think, is very important for this side of town.
Okay, thanks. So I don't know if
I
somebody's
also
got the,
say, could I
hold on
also
a second.
say,
Hold on. I don't know if somebody's got it almost sounds like somebody's cross talking into our network because there's some weird static. But if you're not speaking, including me, let's try to mute ourselves. Nicola, go ahead.
oh, I just wanted to say, in addition to bikes and walking people, could we make sure that the entire North McDowell Boulevard is accessible to anyone who's handicapped? Because it is not. Supposedly it is, but it isn't. So it would be nice if I could take my wheelchair and tootle my way down the street, but I can't.
Okay. Yes, yes.
That they're working on a lot of different ideas for like what the cross section could be. Anything from as was pointed out, I mentioned that there could be anything from a road diet up to a boulevard type approach. So they are looking at a lot with their traffic consultant, Fair and Pierce, looking at a lot of different ways to design the cross section to facilitate as much activity as possible.
Dwayne.
Yeah. Yes, well, it's nice to talk about transportation or paths, but I want to talk about community. And if we've got people living in Youngstown and Petaluma Estates, it'd be nice if we have pathways where they can go somewhere. But how far do you want to take your wheelchair? Let's build something. I think the best place is catacorning from the train, and let's have some food. Let's have some restaurant. Let's have maybe even a bar. Let's have stores and definitely food. That people right now, if you're in Youngstown or Petaluma Estates, you've got to get in your car and drive a mile south in order to get food. And we've got to design a community with walkable distance for the people whose life has decided they were going to be in a mobile home, which is the cheapest way to have your own house. And we mainly want to keep our mind open as to how we get direct the water so that we keep the people in the Youngstown and estates feeling safe in the winter. Further on down, we should be thinking community. When we allow and build community, we should be thinking about where are the parks and the schools, and do we build a retirement community more further south there? If Youngstown and Petaluma is a retirement community, they don't need schools, but they do need parks, and decide upon the appropriate type of services. All the way along that is that there be services would be available to the people who we are building housing for. in each and every case. I find it absolutely upsetting that they took Roundwalk Village, and there's virtually no access, and that's going across McDowell to parks, and there's no access to schools there. They had no business building a family-oriented community that was obviously, unless they were going to set aside big pieces of it for other purposes like schools or and food, if they should have built it for young marrieds or retirees, and not put three-bedroom, two-bath houses there. Let's build the appropriate thing next to the appropriate community amenities.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne.
That's a really great approach. I mean, good comment about just expanding on what mobility can do, and that's the community, or creating community. Jessica.
Yeah, that is a good segue to what I wanted to talk about around the sort of land use considerations, sort of between the two hubs that we're talking about. And this sentiment will be familiar to Andrew and others who've been listening in on the Planning Commission as we've talked about the general plan. But I have just a sort of general unease with the 15-minute neighborhood concept anointing a specific parcel as the community tent pole, when there may be some more organic and energy somewhere else in the community. So I'm always in favor of flexibility. And while I totally get that we have a lot of single family homes along that corridor, to the extent that the land use decisions can allow for flexibility, should an organic community space come forward, I'm in favor of allowing for that, as opposed to just saying, this is what we've got, keep it that way because it's already built. Just in the off chance that someone wants to stand up a cafe that becomes, the third space that single family neighborhood needs, or what have you. So I'm just throwing that out there as a thought around how to encourage that flexibility for organic community building.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
So why don't we go to Dave and then Andrew, and then let's try to get on to the last agenda item. Dave?
Yeah, just two quick questions, just kind of in response to a couple comments. Nicola, I was under the impression that I thought the entire McDowell corridor would have to be ADA compliant as part of this design. I don't know if that's incorrect assumption, but I hope it is. It should be. If not, someone's going to get sued probably, right? So the whole thing should be ADA compliant. And Dwayne, I guess I totally agree with you. I was wondering in the map that you showed prior for the North Study area with the purple and red squares. I guess I was picturing that entire intersection as being a possibility for being kind of the town square, like mixed use. I'm picturing like theater square. Am I picturing the right idea there for what that entire, as far as, restaurants to Dwayne's point, like a community hub, kind of center of the north side of town. Am I thinking about that correctly?
David, I'll jump in. Yeah, you are for sure.
Okay.
I think the bigger question, of course, is how do we calibrate it in terms of square footage related to demand, right? But you're definitely on the right track there.
Great.
To answer your comment about North McDowell, no, it is not accessible all the way.
No, but as part of this design, it has to become accessible. I would assume.
No, it's supposed to be ADA accessible.
Yeah.
And the last contract to redo the sections that were redone were supposed to be ADA compliant. But I cannot even get out of my park where I live.
I know it's awful right now. I'm just, as part of this design, like I would just say that I hope that that's just a given, that it will be ADA compliant, the entire stretch of McDowell.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you want to
help us segue to the next segment? But make your comments on this one, of course, but then we'll move on to the next.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do want to, first of all, Jessica, thank you for bringing that up, right? And I want to make sure we capture it as an outcome of this meeting, but also that we translated into the zoning code update work, because we're going to have to really get creative about what that flexibility looks like. What I think can be interesting though is we can start to test some ideas here as part of this planning process. And because this is running concurrently with the zoning code update as well as some updates to Central Petaluma specific plan, I think we can play around with some things. And um, and that's what we need to do, right? We need to experiment a little bit to innovate and understand what's going to work and give us the flexibility that we want. So keep on beating that drum, keep on making sure that we're always being cognizant of that so that we're being pushed into it. And I think that's what we need. The other thing, David, I wanted to comment on what you suggested about a theater square-like approach to that intersection of McDowell and Corona, because right now we've got the fire station on one corner, and then we've got the postal service on another corner, right? So, and of course, the postal service is going to be notoriously challenging to work through, and the fire station isn't going anywhere. So, I'm thinking maybe we need more of an elongated approach that might come down Corona, past the smart station, and over into where we have some of that active ground floor space up in the annexation area, right? So rather than getting a square, we get almost a little bit shorter segment of a boulevard that would embrace the smart station. But then to Jessica's point, I think it's to be really innovative about how we create flexibility about how some of those areas are used, as community gathering spaces, as the retail and restaurants and services that Dwayne's talking about. So keep on thinking about that, and shoot us an email if you come up with some thoughts about how that might look.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
I'm gonna move on. It's 8:20. I'm perfectly willing to stay longer, but I know some of you can't, so I just want to at least get started into this last piece, and then allow people to comment and take off if you need to, but I can stay and we'll record the whole thing. So the last piece that we'd like to get the working group to talk about or give us some opinion on is the strategy for emboldened placemaking. And so now we've talked about opportunity sites that you could see that are focused on the potential for development. We've talked about the corridor, which wouldn't be so much about development, but being responsive to development and implementing circulation improvements that are corridor wide. So we want to start from these three pillars, if you will, that the consultant is working with. The first one being environment and resilience, the second one being circulation and access, and the last one being about housing and economy in a place. And I think the idea is that these would be three pillars that would permeate into the policies, the design improvements, the actions that are put in place by the specific plan, and start to, everything that we've been talking about. So how do you, if you're going to really develop the North Study Area, sub area, how do you make sure that environment and resilience plays into how the open spaces are designed and function as a stormwater piece? Circulation and access. Of course, it needs to be accessible for the corridor, the whole entire length of the corridor. Any new circulation component that gets built would be accessible. But then how can it be improving the neighborhood to sort of what Brent was talking about earlier? Can, like, the approach to development and design standards for these corridor and the frontages help with the disadvantaged communities, allow for better opportunities for the people that live in those communities to actually get around and facilitate into the area better. So each of these, in addition to having a little icon and text, the consultant is starting to find ways to express them on the study area, on the map. So again, the blue streets are really, the reason they're blue is they're signifying that there's a flood management strategy involved with how that street gets designed, whether it's Corona up at the north, whether it's some of the improvements that might be made into the residential neighborhoods, or even new streets that come along and access other points. Um, Again, the hub and the patch, which I talked about earlier in one of the environmental slides, how do those activate circulation and such? And again, it's that these three pillars can start to be the foundation for how policies and actions are written and designed for the specific plan. Circulation and access, there's a whole range of circulation typologies from the McDowell Boulevard truck corridor all the way down to the SMART trail and then creekside paths, even the path that Nicola was speaking about earlier, another one that, you know, goes up into the creeks and starts to go up towards the water source, if you will. But, and then even if you see at the north, how can some of those streets, which are only conceptual at this point, how can they be designed to facilitate activity and resiliency? And then the last, of course, is development. And you see the blue dots are existing businesses that are already there and prospering. And how do you activate these? And I think, Jessica, you had a really good point. The circle, the dash circle makes it look like that's got to be the epicenter. But how do you build those 15-minute neighborhoods to be more flexible and spontaneous, if you will, or have an ability to be responsive to something that suddenly emerges out of the neighborhood? So these three pillars are envisioned as being the pillars upon which a lot of the strategies and goals and policies and design improvements in the specific plan would build off of. So for those of you that need to move on, please raise your hand. If you're able to stay a little bit longer, let some of the people that need to move on speak first. But I'd like to just turn it over to you guys to see if this is a right strategy, that using these three pillars to really frame how policies and design improvements can be designed for the specific plan.
Leslie.
Yeah, I think that these are great pillars. I think they, they are like a little vague, which I think they have to be. But, I think really like when we're looking at this, we do need to sort of dive deep and think about what we're really looking for. So, we talk about economy, what's good for the economy. Is different to different people, right? I like my perspective is that, if we want a healthy economy, we have to prioritize our local businesses. We don't necessarily want to bring in, big box stores that are going to take a lot of money out of our community, that aren't going to use our local services, things like that. And so, thinking about like when we say we want to prioritize economy, what does that mean? What does that look like? And how do we prioritize the kind of economic development that's actually going to benefit our community?
Great, thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Dwayne.
Yes, I was many years ago involved in the planning for the Corona-Eli plan, the northeast corner, the little gem of a 15-minute neighborhood, according to the architects that came to town. And we deliberately placed a market in the middle. We requested a 10-acre. They settled for the developers to settle for 7 acres. We insisted upon their having parks on each side of the Sonoma Mountain Parkway. We put schools on each side of Sonoma Mountain Parkway so the kids didn't have to cross a major street in order to get to school. We planned the parks and the play fields. But the major word there was community. We were designing community, and planning community. And we were able to lean on the 6 major developers and their 300 acres to build what turned out to be a very livable community. It's a shame it wasn't more of a one-car community, but we started out with developers wanting a 2-car community, and they compromised to be in a 1.5-car community, so to speak. Most of that's within 15-minute walk of whatever amenities were definitely needed just to survive. And so when I look at this, I would like to see the word community to be the first word on everybody's lips. And that I'm talking about, especially to that property that's north of the station. And I'd like that community to be large enough to keep the amenities needed. And we invite the people coming over from the mobile home parks to have food and places to walk and to be restful and nice. I would ask on a slightly different thing, if you have that map up that shows the north end. I would ask, I see where you've got the road that the green, when it has the green marker there, it's a continuation of Maria. And I would assume that Maria ends at the Sonoma Mountain Parkway. It doesn't even go through there, I don't think. And that the direction of transportation to travel be pathways aiming towards easy walk to the station, to the rail station, and that the portion that's right down near that circle you have there, that with the roundabout, between there and maybe 500 feet to the northeast of that, that be a shopping center and with housing above a shopping center, and make it so that was the major density of the whole area, and to work out from there with easy walking distance. I don't see a square grid pattern is at all appropriate. I think we should be curved roads, and every house should have a walking path to the rail.
Okay, thank you. Dylan.
I just want to comment on the pillars. I think the pillars make sense, right? I feel like those are the pillars who have gone for everything we're doing in this city, which is great, right? We want to focus on, environmental circulation and access. I kind of see also, connectivity in that circulation and access. I talked about fiber and, looking at cell connectivity in there as well to look at how we do that, right? So that included in this, in my opinion. But I think this makes sense to kind of focus on these 3 things. And these are the 3 things that any kind of, going back to Dwayne said, I agree with the community, looking at community planning, how you plan a community for the future. I think you have to think of all these 3 things, right? And then things fall into those categories underneath them. So I think it makes total sense to me. And I'll kind of go back to what Dwayne and I think David was saying earlier about Theater Square. I think that area that Dwayne's talking about could be the Theater Square in this area, right? I think that's what I envision over there. And I even we talked about this in one of the meetings. I talked to a couple city council members who would love to see like a library or a small library in that area as well, right, in this side of town. So there's lots of options over here, but I think kind of focusing that as a more of a Theater Square, kind of higher density commercial/retail place that has that sense of community, that people in this area, I live right next to the train station in Brody Ranch, and having all these features here would be amazing because there's not a lot places my kids. I have twin boys who are 10. As they grow, they can have that sense of community right here in their neighborhood, and kind of make sure that we're having this amazing the affordable housing going up right now and in front of us. I think is great and a great addition to our neighborhood. So it's going the right direction, and I think these pillars are the right direction we would go. Just want to add that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or opinions, ideas?
So I just wanted to say real
Quickly, following on what Dylan was just saying, I went to the planning commission meeting a couple weeks ago where they were talking about the
general plan update.
and there was a speaker who said that the Sonoma County Library is going to be building a library up here, or building or rehabilitating an existing building. And apparently there's an idea to put a library up here, which is just outside of our study area. So that could be really interesting.
I
Oh,
believe it was
Jessica.
potentially, yeah, I believe that was potentially for a office for the
Yes.
Sonoma County Library, like the headquarters.
Oh, okay.
And
Sorry.
there's definitely interest in a branch. But yeah, I don't want to spread the rumor that we're getting a second library branch, though I think it would be a great idea, and maybe we can uh, get ourselves there. But the commenter was saying that it was more likely office space.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know that is they're looking at it for office space. I know a library commissioner, and they are looking
Yeah.
at that for office space. But yeah, that's a great idea too. I mean, when the next time I talk to her, I might actually say, "Hey, you might want to put a library there." You know.
Okay. Dwayne.
Yes, if I may add, there's a particular piece of property I hope they would either be building a library or be building a library facility is just north of here. I'll show you this. Can you see can you make out that map? Make out that picture?
Um, is this the right map you
You want to look at?
This is just north of there. That one has to be very careful where one builds because there's some places that go underwater. And fortunately, none of the areas you're showing right here currently on McDowell go more than a few inches underwater, whereas further north on Old Redwood Highway, you get places that are many feet underwater, and when the rain becomes troublesome. So any place that the library chooses to build to buy or build, I would hope would be one of the dry areas.
Okay. Yeah, sorry if
I might have instituted a bad rumor there. I went during the meeting. I went and looked on Google Maps. I'm like, what are they talking about? And it's an office building, so it totally makes sense that it would be county library offices. Um, any other closing thoughts people have about either the placemaking and identity strategy or anything else that we've talked about?
Okay. Well,
I really appreciate everybody's time, especially since I kind of like threw this meeting with only less than 2 weeks notice at you, and a lot of people were able to respond. I really appreciate that. Let me go to the last slide. So what's going on next? Well, as I've said a couple times tonight, there's a planning commission work study session on the 19th. Probably a little bit better developed concepts than what we've seen tonight will sort of will be presented to the planning commission by the consultant team, but hitting on some of these themes that we've talked about tonight. And hopefully the planning commission can give some guidance and recommend potential changes or improvements, and then send that on to a workshop that the city council will have on Monday, July 6th. As I see it, I don't see that we'll probably have a meeting between now and July 6th, but I think once we let the planning commission and the city council give direction to the consultant, I think it would be great in certainly no later than late July, for all of us to gather again and sort of say, allow us to talk about, how the consultant is going to move forward with that council direction, and any input that we want to give, because the sooner we can get that distilled and given to the consultant, that would be great, because after the 6th, they'll be off and running, and they'll be writing the specific plan. They'll be developing a strategy that tells the EIR consultant what to measure and what to go forward with. So if we can get together soon after July 6th and give our opinions and our ideas based on the council direction, that would be great. That's how I see this moving forward from here. So any other thoughts?
okay. Well, again, thank you.
Very, very much for coming. I'm glad this time worked out for as many of us that could make it. And we'll talk soon. And tell your friends and your networks to attend the Planning Commission meeting on May 19th. Give your ideas and opinions.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Everybody.
Take
See
care.
you the 19th.
Thanks, Tom.